There is someone in your life right now who almost never speaks. They sit in meetings and say very little. They listen at dinner while others talk. They watch, they observe, they remember, and somehow they always seem to know more than everyone else. They are never caught off guard. They are never manipulated. They always seem to be 3 steps ahead. You probably assumed they were shy. You were wrong. What you were watching was power, deliberate, calculated, invisible. The quietest person in the room is not struggling to find words. They have chosen not to use them yet, and that choice is one of the most sophisticated strategies in human history. Julius Caesar was not remembered for his speeches. He was remembered for what he saw. When Caesar entered a room full of rivals and enemies, he did not dominate the conversation. He listened while others argued, performed, and competed for attention. Caesar catalogued. He noted who was insecure, who was ambitious, who was loyal, who was pretending. By the time he spoke, he already knew everything he needed to know. His enemies thought silence was weakness. They paid for that assumption with everything they had. This is not a video about being introverted. It is not advice to be cold or distant or antisocial. This is about something that the most powerful minds in history understood deeply, and that almost no one teaches today. Attention is not neutral. Every word you speak costs something, and the person who learns to spend that currency wisely becomes untouchable. What you reveal when you speak. Most people believe that speaking makes them powerful. They believe that the person who talks most controls most. They are wrong. Watch any high-stakes environment carefully. The boardroom, the negotiation, the political gathering. The person dominating the conversation is rarely the most powerful person in the room. They are usually the most anxious. Speaking, especially speaking without pause, without silence, without deliberate choice, is almost always a signal of insecurity. It says, "I need you to notice me." It says, "I need you to approve of me." It says, "I am not comfortable with silence." And in the psychology of power, discomfort is a weakness that skilled observers will use. There is a reason the most dangerous negotiators in history said almost nothing. In the Ottoman court of Suleiman, the magnificent advisors who spoke too freely were considered unreliable. Not because silence was valued as a cultural courtesy, but because the men who survived understood something essential. Every word you speak is a piece of information, and information in the hands of the wrong person is a weapon. The advisor who remained quiet, who listened before he responded, who observed before he committed, was the advisor who lasted. The ones who talked freely, who shared opinions without calculation, who filled every silence with their own voice, were the ones who disappeared. This dynamic has not changed. It operates in every office, every family, every social group on earth. The person who speaks most is studied most. Their fears become visible. Their insecurities surface. Their desires are announced before they are even aware of it. And the quiet observer in the corner records everything. Silence as intelligence gathering. There is a skill that almost no one develops deliberately. Most people spend conversations waiting for their turn to speak. They are not listening. They are preparing. They hear the words but miss the information beneath the words. The quiet person does something different. While you are talking, they are reading you, not your words. You. The slight hesitation before you answer a question, the shift in your posture when a certain subject comes up, the way your eyes move when you describe your plans. The tone that changes when someone challenges you. None of this is conscious on your part. All of it is visible to someone who is actually paying attention. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, never published, never intended for any audience, that the greatest discipline he practiced was listening without forming a response, not passive listening, active, total, complete attention to the person in front of him. He called it the most difficult practice of his reign, and he was the most powerful man in the world. He understood something that most leaders never do. The person speaking to you is always telling you more than they intend to. Your only job is to be quiet enough to hear it. This is not manipulation in the crude sense. It is something more sophisticated. It is the discipline of receiving information completely before deciding what to do with it. The person who speaks constantly receives almost nothing. They are broadcasting. The person who listens completely receives everything, and in any human interaction. The one with more information always has more power. The mystery effect. There is a psychological phenomenon that most people experience without ever understanding it. When someone is open, predictable, easy to read, we find them comfortable, but we rarely find them fascinating. When someone is measured, deliberate, slightly difficult to read, something very different happens. We become curious. We find ourselves thinking about them after the conversation ends. We want to understand them. We want their approval in a way we cannot fully explain. The Borgia family, one of the most powerful dynasties in Renaissance Italy, understood this principle with terrifying precision. Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI, was described by his contemporaries as a man who was impossible to fully know. He smiled when he was angry. He was generous when he was calculating. He revealed nothing of his intentions until the moment of execution. People were drawn to him not despite this opacity, but because of it. Mystery creates magnetism, and the person who is completely readable has no magnetism at all. Think of the people in your own life who have held your attention most completely, the ones you cannot quite figure out, the ones whose approval feels earned rather than automatic, the ones who seem to exist on a slightly different frequency from everyone else. In almost every case, they speak less than the people around them, not because they have less to say, because they understand that restraint is its own form of communication. What silence does to a conversation here is something that almost no one understands about silence. It is not neutral. In a conversation, silence has direction. When you stop speaking and simply wait, the other person will almost always fill the space. And what they fill it with is almost always more honest than what they plan to say. This is one of the oldest techniques in negotiation, interrogation, and diplomacy. The skilled interrogator does not pressure with questions. They ask once, and then they wait. The silence becomes uncomfortable, and the person in front of them begins to talk. Not to answer the question, but to end the discomfort. In that talking, the truth almost always surfaces. Frederick the Great of Prussia used this technique in court when a minister came to him with information. Frederick would listen completely, say nothing, and simply hold the silence. The minister, uncertain whether the king was pleased or displeased, would continue speaking, filling the silence with explanations, justifications, additional information he had not planned to share. By the time Frederick finally spoke, he knew far more than the minister had intended to tell him. The silence was not emptiness. It was a trap, a very patient, very elegant trap. You can use this today. In any conversation where you want more information than you are being given, ask your question. Then stop completely. Do not nod. Do not smile reassuringly. Do not fill the pause with "I see" or "right" or "of course." Just wait. The discomfort will do the rest. The cost of constant performance. There is something exhausting about people who are always on, always performing, always speaking, always presenting a version of themselves for the room to evaluate. You can feel it when you are around them. The energy it requires, the maintenance it demands. And beneath the performance, there is always anxiety, because the person who performs constantly is terrified of what the silence might reveal. The quiet person carries no such burden. They are not performing. They are observing. And because they are not invested in how the room perceives them moment to moment, they are free. Free to see clearly. Free to think without the noise of their own presentation. Free to make decisions based on what is actually happening, rather than on how they want to appear. This freedom is not passive. It is one of the most active states a human being can occupy. The Stoic philosophers called it apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense, but freedom from the tyranny of needing to be seen. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and became one of the most influential minds in history, wrote that the man who does not need approval from the room owns the room, not because he dominates it, because he is the only one in it who is truly free. When the quiet person finally speaks, there is one final dimension to this that matters more than all the others. When the person who rarely speaks finally says something, the room stops, not because of volume, because of weight. Every word they speak has been filtered, considered, chosen, and because they have said so little, everything they say carries the credibility of restraint. Compare this to the person who speaks constantly. Their words are cheap, not because they are stupid, but because there are so many of them. When everything is said, nothing is memorable. Abraham Lincoln was described by those who knew him as a man of very few words in social situations. He listened. He observed. He said almost nothing for long stretches, but when he spoke, people wrote down what he said, not because he was president. He was known for this long before the presidency, because the words, when they came, were so clearly the product of everything he had heard and considered that they landed with a weight that other men's words never achieved. This is available to you, not as a performance, not as a trick, as a genuine practice. The next time you are in a room full of people, try this. Speak 20%, less than you normally would. Listen to what people are actually saying. Beneath what they are saying, ask one question, and then wait in complete silence for the answer. Notice what the room does. Notice what you learn. Notice how differently people begin to treat someone who seems to need nothing from them. The quietest person in the room is not waiting for permission to speak. They do not need it. They are watching you decide whether to give it to them, and noting what that decision reveals about you. That is not passivity. That is the oldest form of power there is. VeilMind. Decode the hidden rules of the mind. They never taught you this in school.